Kate Cooper, welcome back to The Mentor.
Well, thanks so much, Mark.
Now, you're, just for those people who didn't hear us in previous podcasts, you're the CEO of OKX Australia, which is a cryptocurrency site for people to trade with crypto.
Correct.
Buy, sell, whatever. But yeah, I just quickly want to just talk about some of the other things you're doing. You are the co-chair of the Digital Economy Council of Australia.
Indeed.
Wow, that sounds like a heavy-duty title. In that environment, you lead one of the most advanced, regulated digital finance transformations definitely that Australia's ever seen. You were the first head of social media for the UK government.
Indeed.
Wow.
Way back when, 15 years ago.
Still, like that would have been fairly daunting because who the hell knew about social media 15 years ago? I definitely didn't.
No one.
No one. You're sort of
sure
inventing
as
as you
hell
go.
not me.
Yeah, well, you now know about it. I do want to talk about leadership in a technological world or technology world. What does it take to be a good leader in an environment like that?
Very good question. I think one of my favourite quotes is Ray Kurzweil, and he says, "The pace of change will never be this slow again."
Back when?
Or again. He said it about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but it still applies. And in fact, I would say that the pace of change is increasing exponentially, and it presents a massive challenge, not just for organisations and institutions, but us as human beings. Technology is changing faster than our biology can change. And so, given that leaders in the world are also human beings, I think it's incumbent on us to continue to build our skill set in the face of that ever-changing environment. And one of the things that I'm really focusing on at the moment is the role of judgment, in particular decision-making, especially in a human-machine shaped world where actually it's very easy to default judgment to machines or dashboards or models. And it's one of the things that I'm really focused on from a leadership perspective, and focusing on not just being a passenger on the ever march of technology, but actually be an author in that environment and actually be an author of one's own leadership style, one's own future as a leader, one's team's future, and not just kind of be a passenger in that environment.
Would a leader not use AI, or would a leader use AI, then try and work out how it works for themselves? I mean, how does this work? Because it is a shortcut.
Yeah. So a few things on that. Thing number one, I believe everyone should be using AI. And I think if you're not using AI, you will be left behind. You need to master those skills. But I think that in saying that, we have to use AI in a very particular way. And there's a kind of an equation that I think about when I think about judgment in the face of that AI information, the information coming from those models. And it's actually something that's featured in my new book, Edge, which was launched a couple of days ago. And it's a field guide for navigating tech-driven change. And so the equation that I always turn to has kind of two parts to it: inner clarity and outer impact. And if you have inner clarity, i.e. you've base yourself, your decision, your behaviours on what matters most to you, then that provides a solid foundation that no matter what a model tells you, no matter what information you get, that's your foundation. And then you have to think about, well, what is the outer impact I'm going to have in the world if that's what matters most? And I think balancing those two things means that it certainly restores authorship. It restores, for me, myself as a leader.
Agency.
Exactly. Agency is a really good word to describe it. And I think that's one of the things that we're most at risk of defaulting on with technology change, but in particular as AI is accelerating. And so for me, that balance is the way that you maintain your edge in the face of tech-driven change.
So let's just look at inner clarity. And I guess we're diving into your book now. Where's my copy of the book, by the way?
It's winging its way. It's just at the printers, and I'm picking it up this afternoon.
We should send one around, and the boys will put it up on the show. But inner clarity, is that values driven?
Look, listen, you can look at it in the context of your whole life, but I think it's much more useful to look at it in a particular problem you're trying to solve or a particular challenge you're trying to overcome. And so let's imagine I'm going to think about a challenge that
Let's say growth is we're
growth.
flatlining.
Yeah, we're flatlining growth, theoretically. For me, I would be looking at, well, what is the most important thing in that context? I'm CEO of OKX. We are a crypto exchange. The most important thing for me is the safety and security of our users. And that would be the thing that, for me, and it's the thing I do anchor to every day in my job. And then I think, well, if the most important thing is the safety and security of our users and their assets, what impact do I want to have in the world that reflects that inner clarity, the clarity that both myself and my team have? And so for me, that really is about, when you mentioned it earlier, regulation. It's about how do we operate with integrity? How do we make sure that the security settings are the absolute top in the world? How do I signal that to our users? And so that's the kind of way that I would start to kind of anchor the growth challenge that a lot of businesses face because of the world in which I operate.
It's slightly less technologically dense for me to draw another example of that, maybe for those people who don't quite understand what your business does. For example, Qantas will talk about safety, and safety is their inner clarity. They're very clear on what that is.
When all else comes away, profit, shareholders, that's the number one thing they have to get right.
And if everyone in the place can be clear on that, I think what you're saying is then you've got to tell people about that.
Yeah.
And that in itself may help growth.
Yeah.
Because people go, at the end of the day, I want to be safe.
Yeah.
I'm on an aeroplane. I don't want to fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
I don't want to go where the organisation has the best record.
Yeah.
So just to open up what you're saying about inner clarity, that's very clear.
Yep.
And me as a consumer of flying, I will go with Qantas if that's a clear objective of mine, is to be safely
and
flown.
Probably on Maslow's hierarchy, that's a fundamental requirement. You then might move up into wanting to have an enjoyable trip, an on-time trip, all of those things. But fundamentally, if you can, as a leader, pull your entire organization around that as being the anchor, and act accordingly, have your behaviors act according to that, then that is the thing that keeps your human judgment in the face of endless dashboards, the data coming at you from all angles, the models telling you different answers depending on the way that you put the prompt in. And that for me is the anchor that keeps me kind of settled in a world that's constantly changing.
You mentioned the word judgment. Leaders especially, they are required to make judgments often.
Yeah.
And judgments need to be based on something.
Yeah.
A judgment needs to be based on a value, some value, something that we need to achieve. So on the case of the Qantas, or in your case, safety, security.
Correct.
The judgments that you're making where you don't have to rely on AI, or you can scan what AI says to you.
I can use it as an input.
Yep.
Right. So I'll take it as an input of one of the many inputs, like the data that I have on, our users, or like the feedback that we have on Trustpilot. So it's one of the many inputs, but I, as the leader of the business, need to be able to filter all of that and be able to understand where I need to make decisions quickly, where perhaps I need to slow things down and make decisions more slowly, take in more input in order to make sure it's as good a decision as it can be.
That's interesting. So if in your industry somehow safety and security, or security of data, etc., was so well regulated that there was, this is a stupid statement to make, but it became impossible for there to be security errors. And as a result of that, everyone competing with you, the most important inner clarity was about fees or costs. Let's say it was cost of transactions. Do you have to be able to pivot as a leader? Do you have to be able to, or do you just stick to your guns and add pivoting to it? Because, people have become wedded to the fact that OKX is heavy on security, but all of a sudden everyone else talks about pricing. When do you let go of that really important inner clarity?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it's probably
a bolt-on.
A both. It's another. So of course, like value pricing absolutely is part of the equation. But if you haven't got that solid foundation, then frankly, the rest of it doesn't matter. But absolutely, do I have to consider what is the best value for money? Now, value for money doesn't always mean cheapest. Sometimes it can mean
fastest.
Exactly. Or sometimes it can mean the most controls in place, which costs a fair amount of money to have in place and is reflected in the fees, but I as a user know that I'm with the safest exchange out there. And the way I think about it is in reversible versus irreversible decisions. And I think that there are some things that are reversible. We can change our fees all around, but
ratchet up or down, turn the volume up or turn the volume down.
Exactly. However, things that in this context that we're talking about are irreversible are fundamental decisions around trust, and as I said, safety and security. And so for me, where you've got those irreversible elements that are baked into the DNA of whatever it is that you're doing, then that's where you need to take the time. You need to really focus and be very, very deliberate.
So it's all good for people like you and I to make these statements in front of a microphone and a camera now. And you and I have done it on stage together, by the way.
Indeed.
But the team has to follow you.
Indeed.
So let's talk about communications of a leader. How does a leader communicate? How often does a leader communicate without boring everybody to death? Without looking like you're trying to jam it down their throat. That's probably more how is it delivered. That's more about how, I guess. But
that's the outer impact piece, right? So if you've got the inner clarity, then you're thinking, well, the outer impact you have, and as a leader, the outer impact you have is through your team members. And in fact, you can be much more powerful as an individual if you are enacting through other people, not just through your own kind of role in the world. And so for me, there's a few lessons I've learned over the 25 years that I've been leading teams. You can never over communicate, but you should always say the same thing consistently. It still amazes me 25 years on how many times I have to say the one thing over and over again in order for it to land with different people who listen in different ways. And as a leader, you need to be clear and consistent on the core message, but probably deliver it in multiple ways so that you're speaking into the listening of the team, not just speaking in the way you want to speak. And I think that's really important for me. And it's been a key lesson that I've learned over the years. I've got it wrong many, many times. And now I try and tune exactly how I speak to the different audiences that I have in my role, which are many and varied.
It just sounds like the way I phrase this probably won't sound great, but would it be fair to say as a leader to communicate effectively, you nearly need to profile into categories your audience? You might say category one, not necessarily better than anyone else, not better than 2 or 3 or 4, but category one is those people that are good listeners who take notes and don't take me literally but can interpret me. Category 2 is people who take me literally, so I've got to be speaking a literal way to those. Category 3 might be blah, blah, blah. Category 4 might be the drifters who are thinking about something else and they need to be told 10 times instead of 1 time. Do you actually sort of, let's call it profiling, it's a terrible word, but profile these individuals or groups, or how do you do that?
I think personally, yes, I do. Do I try and understand the people who I'm speaking to?
That's a better way of saying it, understanding.
But yeah, not profiling. That sounds somewhat sinister. But no, absolutely. To understand the different motivations, the different learning styles of those individuals, of course. And I think that it's incumbent on you as a leader to be able to evolve your communication style in order to speak to those different styles. And actually, I think probably rather than thinking about it as like a drifter or a really organized person, in my team, I've got people who are lawyers, who are compliance professionals, who are risk professionals. I've then got people who are in HR, who are in finance. I've then got people who are in operations. So you can see I've got salespeople. So you can imagine the spectrum of different personality types that are in place over the team. And I need to adjust the way that I communicate. For example, to the legal team, it's very factual, evidence-based, whereas to the HR team, it might be a little bit more intuitive and about what is the general sense of the feel
Perhaps
of the culture that's going on. Exactly. With the sales team, it's very results driven communication and focusing on those elements. So you can get a sense of inner environment, and of course what I'm describing is replicated in many organisations across Australia. I think that's the most important thing, but I'll be saying the same message to each of those groups of people. So, safety and security is something that we've talked about. I will make sure that I land that core message, even if I have to say it in many different ways and through many different mediums. It's not just about the spoken word, the written word. We have a system similar to Slack. So that's a core communication channel for us as well.
So you use Slack, and when you're talking to your team, you know that there could be different conversations with different teams within Slack, but you use that medium to make sure you get your core messages out to them, to the different groups in the different languages perhaps, or the different cadence, or the different phraseology, or whatever the case may be. But it's always hitting the core things: security and safety, security, safety, security, safety, but in a different format.
Correct.
Like different words perhaps, or
correct.
You might be doing it twice a week or once a month as an update, but you try to wind it into the other messages that you might be talking to them about.
Correct. Do you want me to tell you about a time I got it hopelessly wrong?
Yeah, tell me, because I've had the same experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So rewind, when was it? 14 years ago. I was a new mum. I just had my first child, and I was also running a business. So I couldn't take any maternity leave. I was getting 3 hours sleep in every 24. Everyone used to say, when the child sleeps, you sleep. And I was like, no, when the child sleeps, I work. And that was just when Slack had first come out as a tool. And because I had no real expertise in how to use it as a tool, I thought that by putting an update in Slack, things would be done and the team would get the message. Now, aside from all the backgrounds of being tired and all the rest of it, I think I very quickly learned that the team were not experiencing it like that. The team were just experiencing a tirade of barking orders from me. And what was happening is I was being very directive, but not providing them with the context. And without the context, it's actually very difficult to activate other people's agency and their own sense of accountability. And I actually had a senior member of my team resign a few months later. And in her resignation talk, she was very clearly told me that the team had experienced me as kind of like barking orders at them, and that it didn't go down very well. And it was a real moment for me of I was horrified that that's how I'd come across. But when I stood back and thought about it, I thought, God, I can really see how me sending orders via Slack in one sentence comments where previously emails with paragraphs had been the main communication tool could really come across in that way. And it was the moment where I realized I needed to soften and change my communication style and provide the context that people need in order to then be able to filter whatever it is you want them to do or to action in a way that actually means they have ownership and accountability. And it was a horrible moment in my career when I was given that feedback, but at the same time, it's probably one of the things I'm most grateful for, because it stopped me in my tracks and it said you need to do something different.
Well, in terms of communication, as a leader and as a team member, senior team member, how often do you think that one should be mindful of the fact that text, even if it's beautifully written in prose and language and curated for a particular audience, etc., how often do you think it needs to be supplemented with actual meetings in person? Because text can be misunderstood and misinterpreted, particularly from the reader's point of view, depending on the mood they're in.
Yes.
They may go, bloody hell, I thought I did a good job, because you don't know everything they're thinking, and then they receive your response. They might take it as a slap.
Yes.
Like you're not happy with something they've done or whatever the case may be, or you just forgot to praise them for something that they had done, and because you just want to get this thing through. How important is it to meet people in person, and how do you do that as organizations grow?
Did you know trust is built most strongly when humans look in another human being's eyes in person? Zoom doesn't cut it.
And particularly Zoom doesn't cut it.
I think it's been, again, a fascinating journey over the last 5 years where obviously COVID took us into work from home and being, using screens. And of course, that has a place. But I passionately believe that FaceTime with people is incredibly important, not just because of what the science tells me about how trust is built.
FaceTime, not electronic FaceTime. You're talking about actual face-to-face.
FaceTime, yeah, absolutely. So in our business, we have 2 anchor days a week, Tuesday and Thursday, where everyone is present in the office.
By appointment.
It's required, it's mandated. I have a strong preference that people are also in on a Wednesday. And actually, quite a lot of people choose to be in 4 or 5 days a week just because they get so much value out of the face-to-face contact with their colleagues. And I think that's really, really important. If I think about us as a global business, we have 50 billion customers globally. We're active in most countries around the world. And time face-to-face with my colleagues in the US or in Singapore is some of the most valuable time that I've had in terms of building rapport and relationships. And it's made me so much more able to then function executionally with them when I'm, back on shore in Australia and remote, because we've built that trust.
So let's just say you got 1,000 employees. Let's just say that. And let's just say they're in Australia. You're not going to have a moment with 1,000 people. How do you do that? I mean, do you get everybody together, like 200 at a time or 50 at a time?
Yeah. Well, we have, in our business, we have regular town halls, which...
Would you explain what a town hall is?
A town hall is basically a coming together of multiple departments. Usually, in the case of our
physically,
business, it's hundreds, if not thousands, and the company invests in that time together in person in order to build that connection and that rapport and that way of working. So it's definitely something that we prioritize and that I prioritize. It's not always feasible, and there's ways that you can still build rapport. Like I sometimes think, let's assume Zoom is your tool of choice, that we get very executionally focused when we get on a Zoom call, and actually there is times and ways you can build rapport through the screen as well. But I think the reality is nothing is better than eye-to-eye contact with another human being.
And I think town halls become, actually post-COVID, became more popular. And by the way, we don't go to the town hall. We actually call it a town hall only because I guess it's some sort of throwback from earlier days where you went to a town hall.
Where you literally went to the town hall and listened to the mayor or whoever it might be.
and that's incredibly important. And having a good leader, I presume this is what you guys do, is a good leader has this all set out on a diary. All your people, colleagues all know what the diary looks like. They know when they're expecting one of these town halls, or they know when they're expecting.
There's a regular cadence.
Cadence.
In my business, we have a Tuesday morning stand-up, which is mostly in person. And then we have a monthly town hall, which is where we bring everyone together, including those who maybe
monthly
are, yes.
Wow.
Maybe are colleagues who aren't involved in the day-to-day but need to be aware of what's going on or are interested to learn from some of our experiences. So that's something that it's not always in person, but it's definitely team time together to go away from the minutiae of the day to day, take a step back and think about what's important, where are we going, what are our priorities.
So how easy is it for a leader to underestimate the interest and the perspective, or having a perspective of your colleagues and your staff? Because sometimes the assumption is made, you've got your job, go do your job, turn up, do work, go home. But your staff and your colleagues, they actually like to know what the context of everything they're doing. Yeah. So what do you do in these town halls? I mean, what would you ordinarily talk about? Usually I talk about what I see is going on in the world.
in a very fascinating geopolitical environment at the moment, and that is having a material effect on most businesses.
So you talk about, would you talk about like what's going on in Russia and Ukraine? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, because
wow.
that will, well, in our business, we're a cryptocurrency exchange. That affects the price volatility. And whilst we're not in the business of giving advice to clients, we need to be aware of what clients are experiencing. So that macro geopolitical economic environment actually really matters to our business, and we don't always have the time and capacity to take a step back and look at what's going on in the world. So that is absolutely the kind of zoom out version, and then we'll go into, right, what's the plan for the year, then we'll go into what's the plan for the quarter, and then we'll go into what's the plan for this month, this week, and providing context around what's happening around the globe with our business is really important as well. Like what does our global CEO star see that's important? What are we seeing going on in other jurisdictions like the UAE, which have been kind of very material for us as a group? And I think that the team have regularly given me feedback that providing that kind of macro perspective really helps to anchor them in their day-to-day and understand what matters. And again, it comes back to that inner clarity that we talked about earlier. Inner clarity is actually about what fundamentally matters. And I think that context really helps.
I like that. What fundamentally matters, particularly not just to staff, but to your customers too.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to where we sort of started from, back to regulatory environments. And I know you're big on this. This is a topic. What's this digital assets legislation that's before Parliament, and in particular the Economic Impact Report, which is going to launch on March the 3rd. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good step back, isn't it?
Yeah.
And looking at the industry, I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about and why I do the job I do is the productivity opportunity that is available to Australia, not just because of crypto, but because of the digital finance ecosystem as a whole, which is basically the digitization of the finance system as we know it. And for me, one of the things I wanted to do coming into this role was actually quantify that impact, because one of the things that we know that supports that productivity gain is clarity in regulation. And we wanted the government to be very, very clear with us as an industry about what they wanted to see regulated. And so we've worked with the Digital Finance Cooperative Research Centre and the Digital Economy Council of Australia to produce an economic impact report which quantifies the productivity gain on an annual basis of digital finance in Australia. And we released the initial findings back in May, and that productivity gain was $19 billion a year.
So maybe just take me back a bit, Kate. So digital finance, you mean decentralized finance? In other words, taking it away from, let's call it the banking system, but putting it into the digital environment. Are you saying that there is productivity benefits by doing it that way? In other words, things maybe happen faster or
things
cheaper.
happen faster. I'll give you an example. I had to transfer $3,000 Australian dollars to the UK to top up my UK pension account. I went to my bank, put in the very detailed ISBN number. The amount did not arrive in my UK account until 4 days later. Now, what's happening in those 4 days? Well, there's multiple counterparties that money goes through, each of which take a clip of the ticket. I actually don't know where that money is. Like, I'm sure I could trace it if I really needed to, but I actually don't know. And so the technology that we're seeing come in now, underpinned by distributed ledger technology, also known as blockchain technology, is helping to make that transaction happen in an instant. So I push the button in Australia and it arrives in my UK bank account within a second. And so when I talk about digital finance, I'm talking about all the examples where that delay happens, the risk that occurs when that delay happens, and mitigating for all of that, which means that we're able to, as consumers, have access to digital money at the touch of a button.
And by doing that, it's created a more efficient system, which when we use technology to create more efficient systems, whether it's in finance or any other part of the world for that matter, like it can be getting like one day, once upon a time we used to dig holes with a a spade and a shovel and a pitchfork. Now we use an excavator.
Correct.
And that's just an example of technology, but it was much more productive, much more quick, much more efficient in terms of time. Should be cost too. What you're saying here is in terms of productivity for Australia. Because the number of transactions that happened in what you just explained, there's just probably millions of transactions.
Especially given there is such a strong migrant community in Australia.
Sending money back overseas all the time.
Correct.
All the time. You're saying that those platforms that allow this to happen, that people can dial into to happen, they need to be regulated too, though, because you don't want to going to the wrong places.
Exactly.
You don't want to go anywhere.
You want to preserve safety and security, which
Yes.
is fundamentally what regulation is about.
We did have the Royal Commission not that long ago that actually quite a few of the banks got into trouble for transferring money to places they shouldn't have been transferred.
Correct.
They shouldn't have been facilitating for. It wasn't their fault, but
no,
it was facilitated by bad actors.
Correct.
Here in Australia, by the way.
Yes.
So this productivity, it's actually cleaner, but is much more efficient.
Much more efficient, but it's also transparent.
Yeah.
Because I can track that money where it is. If it wasn't happening in an instant, I can track exactly where it is and where it goes. Whereas at the moment, it kind of goes into a black hole. I have no idea.
Yeah. It goes into a counterparty system. So,
correct.
Because, let's say your account's here with Commonwealth Bank, for argument's sake. Commonwealth Bank might not have a branch in wherever it's going to. They've got to find a counterparty. That counterparty, you've got to find another counterparty, and it might not be the same bank as the bank you're trying to send your own money to.
Correct.
So there might be 3 or 4 interlocutory steps between here and the final destination.
Yes.
And it isn't efficient.
Yes.
It costs a little bit of dough. Maybe there's $100 in it. But it's also, if you add it up across all the transactions that are happening across the system, there's millions. We're talking about billions of dollars.
And it's not just individual user transactions like you and I. It's also institutions transacting in that way. And so the opportunity for digital finance is that all of that system becomes more efficient, more effective, and more transparent.
So what do you expect to get released on March 3rd?
So we're going to release the final findings. So as I say, back in May, we quantified the productivity gain at $19 billion per annum. That's equivalent to about 1% of GDP. Imagine if we could free that up for Australia every year, how we could reinvest that money. I can't reveal the final number, but I can say it's definitely higher. And so on March 3rd, we'll talk about where does that productivity gain come from? And importantly, what are the regulatory settings that need to be put in place in order for Australia to realise that gain? The good news is we're already on the path. We're having new legislation brought in this year that really provides the safeguards to allow for digital finance to flourish, but in the most safe and secure way possible. And now we're working with government. In fact, I'm in Canberra next week to make sure that that infrastructure can be brought to Australia as quickly as possible.
And in your leadership role, this is my final question too, but as a leader of OKX, do you feel as though it's incumbent upon you to step up and be part of these changes?
Absolutely. That's one of the things, I guess the golden thread in my career has been being a change maker. And I see a better world as a result of these changes for everyday Australians, as well as our businesses and our institutions. And so for me, what is my why? Aside from providing a safe, secure environment, what is my why for getting out of bed in the morning? What's the inner clarity I wake up with every morning? It's the opportunity to provide safe, secure, transparent access to financial services for everyone, because I know what that enables in people's lives, in people's businesses. It enables them to buy houses. It enables them to set up their own business. It enables them to fund schooling, ... And so for me, if I can provide that in a more accessible way at a lower cost, in a way that's 100% transparent, that for me is something I can do to make a difference in the world, and what motivates me.
Wow. And I guess the ultimate goal, in an economic sense anyway, for the national economy is productivity. We need to be more productive in just about everything we do in Australia. In fact, our productivity has been dreadful over the last few years. And these simple steps which are going to be not going to be led by government. They're going to be led by businesses.
Correct.
Because it's sort of in your interest for this to work as well.
Yes,
but you
of
want
course.
it to work in a safe environment.
Yes.
So therefore, that in this case, regulation makes sense.
It does. We've been asking for regulation I've been championing it for 5 years now in the space because I believe in the technology. I believe in the infrastructure that companies like OKX bring to the table, and it can be better. But I also believe that it needs to be delivered responsibly. And I think regulation is one of the ways to achieve that.
Kate Cooper, thanks very much, CEO of OKX Australia. Thanks very much. Where I want to thank you is for being on the front foot, being prepared to stand up for these things, and explaining clearly what it's like to lead through technological change.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate it.